I drove a school bus for 6 years in Dane County, Wisconsin. Route 14, out past the Holt's Dairy operation on County Road M, where the fields go flat and the fog sits low in October like something poured into a bowl. 31 kids, kindergarten through 8th grade, picked up along a 12-mile stretch of 2-lane highway every morning at 6:40 a.m. I knew every name, every backpack, every sandwich smell that drifted up from the brown paper bags. That's not a brag. That's just what the job requires when you're responsible for other people's children in the dark. It started with the seat. Row 5, driver's side. A red vinyl bench that had been patched twice with electrical tape in a long black stripe down the middle. November 4th, 2013, a Monday. Cold enough that the kids wore their winter coats and breathed steam when they climbed on. I ran the route, dropped everyone off at Jefferson Elementary by 7:15, then parked the bus in the district lot on Flom Road and walked back to my truck. Standard morning, but when I climbed back into the bus at 2:45 to run the afternoon route, the seat in row 5 was warm, not room temperature warm, body warm, like someone had been sitting there for the past 20 minutes and just stood up. I pressed my palm flat against the vinyl and held it there. I'm a deer hunter. I know what a warm seat means. Something was just here. I looked down the aisle. Empty. I checked under the seats. Nothing. The rear emergency door was locked from the inside with its pin. Every window was latched. The bus had been sitting in a fenced lot with a padlock that I personally watched the district supervisor lock at 7:20 that morning. I told myself the heating system had a malfunction, warm air pooling in one spot. I've heard of weirder HVAC quirks. I ran the afternoon route, told nobody. The second time it happened was November 11th, a Wednesday. Same seat. Same heat. But this time there was a smell. The specific warm milk smell of a young child. Not sour, not dirty. Just that clean dairy smell that kids who grow up around cows carry in their clothes. I stood in the aisle for a solid minute, just breathing it in, trying to place it. None of my current riders lived on working dairy farms. The Holt's operation was the only active one left on the route, and those kids had graduated out 3 years back. I went home that night and pulled up the district's old route records on my laptop. I had a login that technically still worked from a sub-driving gig in 2011. I cross-referenced Route 14 against the county accident database, something I had no real reason to do, which is maybe why I did it anyway. Sarah Veit, 8 years old, November 9th, 2009. She had been a Route 14 rider. She sat in row 5, a different driver. A Tuesday afternoon, visibility near zero and ground fog off the Holt's fields. The bus had made it fine. Sarah had gotten off at her stop on Shea Road. She walked the quarter mile to her house alone, the way rural kids do, and she never made it to the door. They found her in the drainage ditch the next morning. The coroner said exposure. No signs of anything else. Just a little girl who sat down in the ditch in the fog and didn't get up. I closed the laptop and sat in my kitchen for a long time. I kept driving the route. November 19th. This one I wasn't ready for. I was doing my pre-trip inspection at 6:15 a.m., walking the aisle with my flashlight the way you're supposed to, checking for forgotten backpacks, and making sure no kid had fallen asleep and gotten locked in overnight. My phone was in my chest pocket. A Samsung Galaxy S4, the one I'd bought in August, still felt new and strange in my hand. I had just started using the camera function for deer scouting earlier that month. Out of habit, maybe out of something else I can't name, I opened the camera and pointed it down the aisle while I walked. I reviewed the photos later, sitting in the parking lot with the engine running because I needed the heat, and I couldn't make myself go inside yet. There were 12 photos. In 11 of them, the aisle was empty. In the 12th, taken when I was passing row 5, I can tell by the emergency exit sign visible in the background. There was a shape in the seat. Small. shoulder height consistent with a child aged 7 to 9. The vinyl beside it showed the compression pattern of weight. Not blurry, not a lens artifact. The overhead fluorescent had caught it at an angle that made the edges of the shape just slightly softer than everything around it. I did not see anything with my own eyes when I took that photo. I was looking at the floor ahead of me, checking for debris. I sat in that parking lot for 11 minutes. I know, because I watched the clock on my dash go from 6:18 to 6:29. Then I started the route because 31 kids were standing at the end of their driveways in the dark and the cold, and they needed to get to school. That's the job. I didn't tell anyone about the photo. I didn't post it. What I did do, and I'm not sure why this felt like the right thing, but it did, was pull up Airbnb on my phone. Not to book anything. I'd remembered seeing, maybe a year before, that the old Veit farmhouse on Shea Road had been listed as a rental after the family moved away in 2011. I found the listing. It was still active. The reviews went back to 2012. Nice place. Quiet, beautiful views. 4 stars, 5 stars, the usual. Then I found one from October 2013, 3 weeks before I noticed the seat. Stayed one night. Woke up at 3 a.m. to the sound of a child singing in the room adjacent. House was empty when we booked. Checked every room. Nothing. The singing stopped when I opened the door. Left before sunrise. Host never responded to my message about it. Would not return. Below that, November 2013, different user. Something moved my boots from beside the bed to the center of the room while I slept. I am a light sleeper. I heard nothing. They were placed neatly, toes pointing toward the window that faces the road toward the school. I don't know why I noticed that detail, but I couldn't stop noticing it. I scrolled further. January 2014. My daughter refused to sleep in the smaller bedroom. She said a girl was already using it and didn't want to share. My daughter is 4 and has never done anything like this before or since. The listing had no new reviews after February 2014. The host account was still live. I sent a message through the platform asking about the property's history. The response came back in 40 minutes, which surprised me given the hour. We no longer rent the Shea Road property. It has been empty since February. If you have questions about Sarah, please do not contact this account again. I stared at that message until the screen went dark. I drove Route 14 for 3 more weeks after that. Every single morning and afternoon, row 5 was cold. Whatever had been there, I believe it understood that I'd looked, that I'd found the name and sat with it and didn't pretend. I'm not a man who uses words like closure lightly. I'm a hunter. I understand that some things pass and some things don't, and the difference is usually whether something got witnessed. I requested a route reassignment in December 2013, got it without pushback, which told me I wasn't the first to ask. I still hunt the fields out on County Road. Last October, I was sitting in a blind, about 100 yards east of Shea Road, just before first light, when I heard a bus. I checked my watch, 6:38 a.m., 2 minutes early, but close enough. I watched the headlights come around the bend and slow down near the old Veit driveway, the way buses slow down when they're checking for a kid at the end of the road. There hasn't been a child at that address since 2009. The bus stopped for 11 seconds. I counted. Then it drove on. I didn't look at the windows. I've been the assistant principal at Harwick Elementary for 11 years. My name is Dale Purcell, and I want to be clear about something before I start. I am not a superstitious person. I grew up in Aroostook County, Maine, where you learn early that the woods do not care about your feelings, and neither does the cold. So when I tell you what happened in Penwick last October, I need you to understand that I've sat with this for 8 months. I've tried every rational explanation, and I have nothing left. Penwick is a town of about 2,400 people, 43 miles from Bangor on Route 9. Mostly timber workers, a few dairy farms, a hardware store called Lavoie's that sells live bait out of a cooler by the door. We have one school, K through 8, and I work there. My commute is 4 minutes. I know every pothole on Birch Mill Road by feel in the dark. It started on the morning of October 9th, a Wednesday. I got to school at 6:50 a.m. like always, made a pot of Folgers in the break room, and sat down to go through absence reports. That morning, we had 14 kids out. That was almost double our usual rate for a Wednesday. I flagged it, sent a note to the school nurse asking if there was something going around, and got on with my day. By Thursday, we had 22 absences. Friday, 31. I called the county health office. They told me they'd look into it. I assumed stomach bug. That Friday afternoon, I stayed late to finalize a disciplinary file. Around 6:15 p.m., the building was empty. Just me and the hum of the fluorescent lights in the main hallway. I was walking toward the parking lot when I passed the display case near the front office, the one with student artwork and sports photos, and I noticed something odd. The glass on the case was fogged from the inside. That happens sometimes in November, when the heat kicks on. But it was early October, still 52 degrees out. Heating system wasn't running. I touched the glass and it was cold. Not cool. Cold. Like a car window in January. I told myself the HVAC had done something weird. I went home. I woke up at 2:11 a.m. that Saturday to the sound of my own voice, not like a sleep-talking thing. I mean, I was already awake, and I could hear myself having said something, the echo of it still in the room. I don't know what the word was. My throat was dry the way it gets, after you've been speaking for a long time. I'd been dreaming. I don't usually remember my dreams. This one I remembered completely. I was in the Penwick Funeral Home on Depot Street. I've been inside it once, years ago, for a viewing. In the dream, I was in the preparation room in the basement. I've never been in that room in my life, standing under a single fluorescent bulb that buzzed and skipped. The room smelled like formaldehyde and something underneath it, something organic and wrong, like turned meat in a closed space. There were 2 stainless steel tables, both occupied, both draped in white sheets. I was standing between them, and I knew, with that specific dream certainty, that I was not supposed to look. But I also knew that whatever was under the left sheet was not a body. It had the shape of one, but it was breathing. Slowly, with effort, like something that had recently learned how. I stood in my kitchen at 2 a.m. drinking tap water, and I genuinely laughed at myself, stressed about attendance numbers, ate leftover chili too late. Classic. Monday I came into 44 absences and 3 teachers who hadn't shown up. I started calling parents. The first 4 I reached all said the same thing, almost word for word. Their child hadn't been sleeping well. Nightmares. Wouldn't say what they were about. The 5th parent, a woman named Carla Dennehy, whose son Tyler was in 4th grade, paused for a long time when I asked. Then she said quietly, "Dale, I had one too." I asked her what she meant. The dream. I had it. Tyler had it. My husband had it. We were in a room. There were tables. I didn't say anything for a moment. I told her I hoped Tyler felt better, and I hung up. I called 6 more parents that afternoon. 4 of them described the same room. 2 of them mentioned the buzzing light. One woman, Becky Stairs, whose daughter was in 2nd grade, said she'd smelled something in the dream. She said it smelled like the funeral home. I asked how she knew what the funeral home smelled like, and she said she didn't. She'd never been inside it. But in the dream, she knew. On Wednesday, October 14th, I drove to the Penwick Funeral Home at noon. It's a white Victorian on Depot Street with green shutters, owned and operated for 30 years, by a man named Gerald Foss. I'd met Gerald maybe twice. Quiet man. Drove a gray Subaru. I knocked on the front door. No answer. Knocked again. Called the business number from my cell. I could hear it ringing inside, faintly, through the door. No answer. I was about to leave when I noticed the side door, the one that opens to the driveway, was ajar. Not open. Just not latched. Cold air was coming out of it. I'm talking 40-degree air from inside a building in the middle of the afternoon. I pushed it open and called Gerald's name. Nothing. I stepped into a service hallway. White tile, bare bulb overhead. The smell hit me immediately. Formaldehyde. And underneath it, the other thing. I had smelled that combination exactly once before, in a dream, 4 days ago. At the end of the hallway, there were stairs going down. The light in the stairwell was on. I want to be honest about what I did, because I've thought about it a lot since. I did not go down the stairs. I am a 44-year-old school administrator in khakis and a fleece vest, and whatever I would have found at the bottom of those stairs was not something I was equipped to deal with. I backed out of the hallway, I got in my car, and I called the Penwick PD. 2 officers arrived within 8 minutes. I waited by my car. They went in. 15 minutes later, one of them came out and told me Gerald Foss had been found in the preparation room, deceased. He said it appeared to be a medical event. He asked me not to discuss it and gave me the number for a victim services line, which felt like a strange thing to give someone who hadn't witnessed anything. The absences went back to normal the following week. Teachers returned. The dream, as far as I can tell from the parents I've quietly followed up with, stopped. But here is the part that I haven't told anyone. The part I found when I got home that Wednesday and sat down and looked up the Penwick emergency dispatch records, because they're public record in this county, and you can request them through the town website. On the morning of October 9th, the same morning the absences started, the Penwick Fire Department received a 911 call at 3:24 a.m. from an address listed as the Penwick Funeral Home. I found the archived recording. It's 41 seconds long. The call connects. There's the standard dispatcher prompt. And then there is nothing but the sound of the fluorescent buzz, that specific, uneven buzz, fast, slow, fast, for 37 seconds. And then, in the last 4 seconds of the recording, a voice. It does not sound like Gerald Foss. I've heard Gerald Foss speak. This voice is slower, heavier, like something reading from a page in a language it had only just learned. It says, "We are practicing." The call disconnects. No unit was dispatched. The log notes it as a pocket dial. Gerald Foss's official cause of death was cardiac arrest. His body was found on one of the 2 tables in the preparation room, arranged, according to the officer I later spoke to, as if for viewing. There were 2 tables in that room. The coroner's report lists only one body.